Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 10th of May of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. If you remember a few weeks ago and during all the previous months we were talking about the Ukrainian counter-offensive operation, we're trying to understand, trying to speculate a little bit when exactly the Ukrainians were planning to do this, and most of the sources were saying that Ukrainians are going to launch their counter-offensive operation on the 10th of May, right after the Victory Day. And to tell the truth, it happened. Today, the Ukrainians launched counter-offensive operation. It wasn't a very big counter-offensive operation, but anyway, as a result of that attack, they managed to achieve some success. And during this video, we're going to discuss the battle for the south of Bakhmut, and we will discuss in details what exactly the Ukrainians managed to achieve, and we will try to analyze the situation of the Russian forces in this area. But before that, let's start with this global map, and we have added another icon in this area, and we have added right in front of Evgeny Prigozhin, the head of Wagner, we have added Zaluzhny. He is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine. And I have added this icon in Dnipropetrovsk because of many things, and the first one is that some sources were saying that currently the Ukrainian commanders took a decision, military authorities took a decision to move their main headquarters as close as possible to the combat line, and furthermore the Russian sources are saying that, if you remember, during the previous weeks they made a lot of missile attacks, and today, this day, started exactly from the piece of news that as a result of one of those attacks, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Zaluzhny, was killed. So, and if you remember, a few days ago there was a meeting of NATO officers of NATO countries where they were trying to call Zaluzhny to join that meeting, but later one of the military authorities of NATO countries reported that Zaluzhny couldn't take participation in that meeting because of a lot of things on the ground, a lot of things to do in Ukraine. So, one more time, a lot of sources are saying that there are very high chances that Zaluzhny, the head of Ukraine army, was killed. But from the other side, if we are talking about the previous experience, if you remember, when the Russians started the special military operation, the head of Russian army, the prime minister of the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, Shoigu, disappeared for 2 or 3 weeks or something like this. Also, and there were a lot of talks and rumors that maybe Shoigu was killed or something like this, or poisoned or something like this. But later we understood that he was very busy and he took a lot of part in that the first stage of special military operation. So probably Zaluzhny currently is very busy with the situation in Ukraine and with the counter-offensive operation in Bakhmut. Now let's go to the Western sources map. As you can see, I have added some changes in this area. The first one is that I have colored in almost yellow color this small salient, this one. And this morning we start receiving updates that as a result of counter-offensive operation, the Ukrainians managed to return control over this salient. Some Russian sources on the ground are saying that at first that was something like just a regular recon combat, but so the things took place as follow. There was two groups in this area, the 72nd Brigade of the Russian forces and Wagner's. They were defending this area along the forest lines, along the forest in this area, and so on. At some certain point of time, when the Ukrainians launched some offensive operation in the vicinity of Ivanovsk, the Wagner's commanders took a decision to move their own forces, the Wagner forces, to the north, trying to prevent the Ukrainian counter-offensive and penetration operation. And the rest forces of 72nd Mechanized Brigade, not Mechanized, 72nd Brigade, that were located in this area, thought or had an opinion that Wagner's left them. And so that's why they was very disappointed with that, because why is that? Wagner's left their positions. The Russian sources are saying that there are no communication between the forces in this area and something like this. And after that, the Ukrainians, as soon as they understood that Wagner's left their positions to prevent any penetration on the north, they started offensive operation exactly in the weak point. and they sent some forces and some Recco forces that managed to bypass the main forces, and those Recco forces managed to reach the artillery position of Russian forces in this area. And of course, imagine yourself artillery positions against the stormtroopers of 5th Storm Brigade or something like this of the Ukrainian side. Of course, we understand what kind of result of that battle we can see, and the Russians took a decision to step back. And after that, as soon as the Ukrainians understood that the situation is good and develops in their favor, they called their base and asked some support of mechanized parts, of heavy tanks and so on, and the Ukrainians sent tanks in this area. And I believe that today you saw the video when the Ukrainians tanks entered the trenches and how the Russians were running away through the fields in direction of their main position somewhere in Klishchiivka or maybe along the channel or something like this. So that was the short story. That story was provided by the Russian sources. Of course, it's up to you to believe or not. We just discussed the thing that took place and let's say the how possible options how the situation could develop during the day. So that was the situation. Currently, we understand that this, let's say, orange cloud is under Ukrainian control, and the Russians have their positions along the channel. It's also very nice positions. We understand this, that the Ukrainians, if they want to attack Klishchiivka, and we understand that if the Ukrainians are planning to develop this bridgehead, there are three main targets that Ukrainians may try to attack and to establish control over within the next attempt to attack in this area. First of all is Klishchiivka. It's a very important fortification area. If you remember at the beginning of the storming of Bakhmut, the clashes for this area took around months or two. It's a very powerful fortification, and Klishchiivka itself is located on the hill. Another trenches is located a little bit to the southwest of Klishchiivka. These trenches and this fortification is located here, and probably that was exactly those fortifications that stopped and slowed down the Ukrainians during the day. And using these trenches, the Russians didn't allow the Ukrainians to develop their offensive operation further. And these are two important things that Ukrainians might try to capture. And another one is, I believe, the most important part is the forest between the channel and Ivanovska. This one. This is the most important area, and the reason why this area is so important is if you take a look at this map, you're going to see that there is a channel that goes from N32 road right to, let's say, Gorlovka. This is the channel, and there are not much places where the Ukrainians or the Russians are able to cross this area, not just using infantry. I believe that they can use a lot of like pontoon bridges or even to bypass this area using their fits, but there are not so many places where the Ukrainians, either the Russians, are able to cross this area using the armored vehicles and tanks. And one of the most valuable place is the area that's located on the north. This one, as you can see, there is a small ground and the channel goes on the ground. So there is let's calculate a small tunnel up to 500 meters, and this area, this corridor is encircled by the forest from two sides, and there is a local road with normal quality that Ukrainians are able to use. So currently the situation is that if the Ukrainians establish control over the entire, let's say, bank of this channel, so from this perspective, what kind of benefits the Ukrainians are able to achieve from this situation? And the most important one is that from this bridgehead, the Ukrainians are able to cut the supplies and support roads of the Russians that goes from Klishchiivka to this forest. So currently we can say whether there are some forces Russians or not, they appear in a small operational encirclement. Nobody says like this, but looking at this map, we understand that these forces are in operational encirclement. They can't get supply and support from using the northern roads because of fire control from Ivanovska, and currently there is another fire control from the south, from the channel, and the main road is cut off. I believe that the Russians do still have possibilities to go from and in and out from this area using forest lines and trenches, but anyway, the situation currently the situation is very bad for the Russians, not just who are located in this small salient, but also for entire strategical and tactical situation. Currently, I believe and I expect that the next night the Ukrainians are going to start another attempt to attack the Russians in this area, and probably they will establish the physical and fire control over the roads on the south, and they will try to attack these forests from the north. And the main goal, as we discussed, to establish control over this passage that Ukrainians in the future will be able to use to send tanks, armored vehicles and heavy weapon on this bank of the channel, and will be able to start storming and attacking Klishchiivka and these trenches. So this is a very important battle. From the other side, the Russians did have some progress in Bakhmut as well, and today there was a few reports from the Russian side that they have established the final control and that they cleared and captured the entire Tchaikovskого Strait. So basically, the entire area from the south, let's say, to the Piramohi Strait is under Russian control. And this is also very important because the main reason of Ukrainian attack in this area is to unblock the supply road N32 that Ukrainians are able to use to support from Chasiv Yar the western part of Bakhmut. But currently this is like this road is useless, and because of the fact that the Russians established control over the southwestern part of Bakhmut, and we got these updates today. Maybe this is some kind of speculation, and we need to wait another day until every single mappers will update their info, and as soon as we get some video and photo confirmation from this side, and if we receive such confirmations, then we can say that this block is secured by the Russians and this road is useless, and like this bridgehead has no value for the Ukrainians, just immediate victory or something like this. Or probably they have some plans and maybe to attack the Russians also along the N32 road in this direction to unblock the southwestern part of Bakhmut as well, probably. So we need to expect the upcoming night and of the local time. So at least on the southern front of the western Bakhmut, I expect two operations. The first one is to liberate or to return control over the forest that located between Ivanovska and Klishchiivka and the channel, and another attack if the information about the establishing control and clearing of Tchaikovsky Street is correct. The Ukrainians need to make a counter-offensive in this area to unblock this area as well. Another interesting updates are coming from the Russian side, from the Chromove and 0506 road. We haven't received any video, photo or any kind of information, but the Russian sources are saying that they managed to develop their offensive operation exactly along these arrows, and probably the Russians managed to get the outskirts of Chromove, and this is also very very bad piece of news for the Ukrainians, because we see that from one side they have some counter-offensive, but maybe it's too late. It's too late, and the Ukrainians are no longer able to do anything to unblock Bakhmut. Another area I expect the Ukrainians are going to launch some counter-offensive operation during the upcoming night is the area from Minkovka, Orekhovo-Vasilievka, Vasikovka. They need to do this to pin down the Russians who are currently located on the road of 506. And the thing is that if the Ukrainians launches this counter-offensive operation, then the Russians will be forced to send some reserves to stop the Ukrainians on this line and not to allow them to develop their offensive operation. In this case, the Russians won't be able to start this offensive operation in direction of Chromove because they don't have reserves. So it's like basically it will be like some kind of they prefer to stay in the safe zone and not to risk during this situation, because the results of these clashes during the next days are unpredictable. It's very difficult to understand what exactly is going to happen. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Russian Federation from their side reported that as a result of fierce clashes on Donetsk front line, the Ukrainians lost 240 soldiers, 7 armored vehicles and 1 artillery system. The Russians during the previous night reported about air attack, aircraft attack, bombing of Ukrainian positions of 67th, 80th and 5th brigades. If we take a look at deployment map, all those brigades we can find exactly in Ivanovska. As you can see, this 5th, 3rd brigade, 80th brigade. So as you can see, the forest that we were talking just a minute ago. So the Russians were mainly concentrated in this area. So this is another evidence of possibly of some offensive operation from the Ukrainian side, and the Ministry of Defense were trying Russian forces were trying to pin down, to freeze, and not to allow these forces to develop their offensive operation. Furthermore, right before all this situation, we got some updates from the 3rd Storm Brigade Ukrainian forces that they also launched some local offensive operation and they achieved some success. But we don't have any results on the maps on the ground what exactly they managed to change on the ground. But anyway, the situation is critical, and as we discussed, the Ukrainians launched their counter-offensive operation and they took a decision to do this in the vicinity of Bakhmut. But probably they're going to launch the same offensive operation in Kherson and Zaporozhye as well. Now let's go to other front lines. Let's discuss a little bit them. Furthermore, one more thing, that the Russians continue attacking the Ukrainians' positions in Kramatorsk and the towns that located in the back of Chasov Yar and so on. As a result, they managed to destroy the warehouse ammo depot of 55th Artillery Brigade or Rocket Brigade. I believe this is a very important piece of news. Now we're going to Donetsk, and today the Russians, for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation, for the first time since they announced about capturing Kamyanka, published photo and video confirmation of that. So there was like a person who visited this village and he go through this area. So basically the information about capturing Kamyanka was confirmed by the Russian side. So we understand that the situation of Avdiivka is getting worse for the Ukrainians from day by day. Also, the Russians are saying that as a result of clashes, artillery duels on Kherson-Zaporozhye area, the Ukrainians lost 150 soldiers, 15 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems. Furthermore, the Russians destroyed another ammo depot of 121st Brigade on the south of Kherson. Recently, this area is highly concentrated by the Russian artillery forces. The Ukrainians moved a lot of boats, a lot of ammo depots, a lot of shells to this area. Maybe this is some kind of attempt to force the Russians to think that they're going to attack in this area, but probably the concentration of the forces and concentration of the attacks and activity in this area tells me at least that probably soon we're going to see another attempt from this area in direction of south of Kherson. And the final area is Kupiansk and Liman front line. There are no changes on the Seversk area, and the Russians stopped any bombing, any shelling in this area after the Russians captured this industrial zone. Today they published another video of a storm process of this territory by the special unit Akhmat. The Russians continue just bombing and shelling the Ukrainian positions in Bilogorovka, the ammo depot, so 54th of 81st Brigades and so on, but as you can see, without any changes on the ground. And the same situation, no changes on the ground, the Kupiansk and Liman front line. The Ukrainians, according to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, lost just 110 soldiers. So as you can see, the level of losses of the Ukrainians have been reduced. So probably we are going to see some kind of silence before storm, because if the Ukrainians are going to launch a real offensive operation upcoming night in Bakhmut, we need to expect more attempts on different type front lines with more aggressive attacks. And probably the upcoming night is going to be the most important, that will determine at least the next few weeks of fierce fightings on the front lines. The Russians are saying that Ukrainians made another attempt to cross the border between Russia and Ukraine. They sent another commandos group, but that commandos group was spotted and discovered by the Russians, and as a result of the clashes and fightings, the Ukrainians were forced to step back. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.